So I want to share with you all the station that I'm listening to. This is actually Chill Hop. And if you're ever in a classroom and you're sharing this with students, or you're at home or just at work and you just want something calm and mellow to listen to that has a little hip hop beat to it, I encourage you to check out Chill Hop. They have several videos that are out that's just straight instrumental. The scene is stayed typically like this. If you wanted a calm and serene scene in your background, you can actually use that. And this is the spring 2022. So kicking your spring off right. I'm going to drop this into the chat just so that you can have it there. But Chill Hop is a nice little vibe of music that you can use to kind of set the tone in your classroom and relax things and switch it up somewhat. So my name is Tyree Rivers, and I work with Climate and Culture in the Office of Social-Emotional Student Support Services. And it is my pleasure to be with you today. One of my roles is to help support Panorama throughout the district. So if you have like login issues, you need to be linked to your school, you need to make sure you have the right settings. I would most likely be one of the person that you would contact, or you could reach out to Panorama Support and they would help get you situated with whichever school you needed to be linked to. Just so that you know, I'm going to take you just a little bit through some of the data, and hopefully we'll have time to play with the playbook. So if you do not have access to Panorama, or you haven't tried logging in before, I strongly advise logging into secure.panoramaed.com. And again, you're logging in with your CCS email, and you're also going to, use your CCS password. So CCS email, CCS password, those two things will get you into the Panorama platform. And hopefully everyone should have access to the playbook, because that's what we'll actually be taking a look at for today, okay? So this presentation that I'm sharing with you today, this was actually prepared by one of our Panorama support professional development persons, and her name was Caitlin Riley. And Caitlin, actually, she did a data inquiry. So I took some pieces of it, and the recording is there. So when you get this presentation, you can go back and watch the October 15th PD day that she actually did, and she did a deeper dive into the data. We're not going to go that deep into the data. We're going to just skim pieces of it and make it relevant for what our roles are for today. But you can see that full presentation by clicking on the record button that's linked to this actual slide deck. So you'll have access to that at the end if you want more learning, and that's about a 90-minute presentation. So before we begin, one of the things, if you had joined me last time, I stuck with the same thing. And this is an SEL warm-up, social-emotional learning. And this is for social awareness, to kind of check the temperature in the room, to see what's going on. Doing these activities like this is not only good for students, but it's also good for adults. So you have an opportunity to connect your feelings and emotions that you have to things such as weather. So like on here, I'm going to give you two extremes, and then we'll have a middle ground. So one of the things is, it's been a rainy day. It's been kind of rough. I can't wait till 5 o'clock comes so I can log off. Or if you're somewhere in the middle, kind of partly cloudy, I feel okay. Not too bad, not too great, but just kind of in the middle there. Or you can be the rainbow. You can be that burst of sunshine that's happening everywhere. So if you're that rainbow, you can type in the chat whatever you're feeling like at the moment. So if you are cloudy and rainy or stormy, you can put that in there. If you feel like a rainbow where everything is fine and great, or somewhere in between, try to associate a weather type to whatever emotion that you're feeling today. And I'm going to type mine in the chat. So I see Lydia is a rainbow. I'm sunny and a rainbow. Or you can feel free to unmute yourself and let us know too. Okay, I see another sunshine. Using the emojis there, nice. So we have some sunshines happening. And if it's been a rough day, it's been a rough day. Sometimes silence is golden. And you have to take that for what it is. But teaching students how to do that and practicing that also with staff, this is a nice way just to kind of check in, just to see where people are. Thank you, Holly, for typing in chat. She's partly cloudy, and little jury with occasional burst of sunshine. So there were some happy moments happening throughout the day there. Love it. I hear you, Miss Davis. Silence is golden. Sometimes you need that moment just to woosah and put it all together. Well, welcome everyone. So I'm just going to give you just a little overview of what Panorama is. So Panorama is actually a platform, and I love to say, and you can read the pieces there on the slide, but one of the things that I love about Panorama is it has an opportunity to catch a moment where you can have a survey. It's not an assessment, a survey where students, families, and staff can share their voice, meaning that they get to take the survey and you get some insight for how they're feeling about their social emotional well-being, about school climate and culture. So what this has been developed by, you can see it's been developed by the Harvard Graduate School. A lot of the questions that are in their bank have been norm referenced, and you see they've surveyed over 13 million students across the whole United States. And one of the things key too is within our Central Ohio area, a lot of the school districts around us are actually using Panorama. So Columbus is an anomaly doing it by themselves. We're all invested in the work of social emotional learning. And one of the pieces that we're looking at to help support that piece is Panorama. So that's a little bit about Panorama. And for today, we're going to do a couple things. We're going to practice key mindsets for creating equity and inclusion in data analysis. So just kind of some things to keep in mind when you're looking at data, kind of checking ourselves and looking at making sure we're doing it from an equitable lens. And then the other thing is we're going to actually explore parts of the Panorama Playbook. So hopefully you had an opportunity to kind of log in and play around with it. And I'll give you that website again to make sure that you have access to it. And I want you to kind of play around, see what's there and available for you, because it's a nice tool to actually be able to reference. Any questions about where we're going for today? Okay. So for our time together, always take a moment and just to think about what's your why. So just thinking about what's your purpose, what's your intention. So for what you're being here for today, we're going to take just, I would always like to say, focus on what you want to do. So if your purpose is just to see what is this tool all about, then you might just be purpose setting, but then processing it. What does this tell us about our students? What are some strengthened areas? And then planning, what connections can you make to your work? And how can we actually use Panorama as a valuable resource within the classroom and with supporting students? So when all of these areas here can cross over, but for our time together today, I always like to say, set your intentions for what you want to do to maximize your learning for this particular session today. And thank you, Holly. Holly put her intention in the chat. Appreciate it. She wants to get more information and how it might be used. And hopefully we'll be able to answer that today. So just kind of briefly, just social emotional learning. So take a moment and look at what's on the screen here. And then if you see any words or phrases that stand out to you, you can feel free to type those in the chat, or you can come off mic and share those with me. So are there any words in that definition that stand out to you?
Manage emotions.
Manage emotions, thank you. And social emotional learning is about managing emotions, part of it. Children and adults. So I like that too, that call out, because social emotional learning, social emotional well-being is not just an isolated thing for the youth that we serve. It also impacts us too as adults. Any other words that stand out to you?
No one else is wanting to share. The other thing that stands out to me, positive relationships.
Positive relationships. Thank you. So all of those things are key. And when you think about social emotional learning, one of the things just to think about is just thinking about kind of reflecting on when you were probably in kindergarten or preschool, and all the skills that you may have learned there, just how to play together. A lot of the preschool settings, I remember, had like a little kitchen set and had little areas, manipulatives, and we kind of floated through with different groups. You learned a lot of things there just in regards to our attitudes, our skills, how to manage emotions. Think about how students transition and just being able to name and identify their emotions. And then we all have goals at the beginning of each year. Happy New Year. We're setting goals, whether they're weight loss, whether they're rethinking and getting organized, is some type of goal that's being established there. And is not necessarily just, again, isolated to students. These are things that adults are experiencing too. And one of the biggest pieces that kind of stood out to me in this definition was to feel and show empathy for others. So have that compassion where you're willing to understand someone's perspective. That's another key thing with social emotional learning. And for more information, it does take a look at equity too. And there's some connections to equity between the SEL competencies. And there's a link in here that actually takes you to the CASEL website. And CASEL is one of the leading researchers with social emotional learning. And Panorama uses a lot of its work in order to keep things in alignment, so that we're saying the same thing, learning the same things, but doing it with an equity lens, seeing people beyond just the outer shell that's there, but really taking a deep dive to understanding how it says here, the different cultures and the power and dynamics. Welcome, Ms. White. So one of the things when it comes to equity is how we perceive information. We all have a backpack that we bring to us wherever we go. And with this backpack is packed in there all of your life experiences. So it may be your upbringing, it may be your religion, it may be where you lived and where you grew up. You might have grew up in a different country or a different side of the country. Your experience, your life experiences, all of those things play into how we take information in and what we perceive it to be. So with that just in your mind, one of the things that we're going to focus on today is this last bullet, is this own your personal ladder. So the ladder is this: get to know your brain's filters, assumptions, and beliefs before you take action. Let me read that one more time. Get to know your brain's filters, assumptions, and beliefs before you take action. So one of the things that, again, how we process information, how we process it is actually going to impact our decisions and our behaviors, and words that come out of our mouth. I want you to take a look at a video. And this video is by Trevor Mader, and he's actually looking at what's called the ladder of inference. And the ladder of inference is, how do you perceive and process information? So he gives an example here, and I just kind of want you just to watch it, just to see what you think, and then we'll have some discussion about it. So be ready to talk, okay? All right, let me get this off the screen.
Imagine a microscopic-sized ladder contained in the part of our brain that will label our subconscious. The ladder of inference, which was first proposed by Harvard professor Chris Argyris, is the basis of this model. Every time we interact with someone, that experience enters the ladder at the bottom. That same experience zips up the ladder in the blink of an eye, exiting at the top. This process happens thousands of times a day without us knowing it. Let's focus on what happens on each rung of the ladder. On the first rung, we have the raw data and observations of our experience. This is very similar to what someone watching a video recording of our experience would see. Moving up to the second rung, we filter in specific information and details from our experience. We unknowingly filter based on our preferences, tendencies, and many other aspects that we believe are important. Onto the third rung, we assign meaning to the information we have filtered through. This is where we start to interpret what our information is telling us. On the fourth rung, a very crucial thing happens. We develop assumptions based on the meaning we created on the previous rung, and we start to blur the distinction between what is fact and what is story. On the fifth rung, we develop conclusions based on our assumptions. This is also where our emotional reactions are created. On the sixth rung, we adjust our beliefs about the world around us, including the person or people involved in our experience of the moment. On the seventh and final rung, we take action based on our adjusted beliefs. Still with me? Great! Let's take a real-life example and run it up the ladder to see how this all works. Have you ever been cut off in a parking lot, signal light on, as you steer toward your coveted spot only to slam on your brakes at the last minute as someone pulls in front of you and steals your spot away? Imagine that experience and notice all of the data and observations landing on the first rung of your ladder. Now let's watch what we pay attention to on the second rung. Who cares that it's sunny out and the birds are chirping? The 50% off sign outside of your favorite store is meaningless. You filter in the sensation of your grip tightening on the wheel, you feel your blood pressure rise, you hear the squeal of your brakes, and you notice the expression on the face of the other driver as he pulls in front of you and quickly looks away. Time for our third rung. Ever since you were young, your parents taught you the importance of waiting in line and taking your turn. You live and die by the rule of first come, first serve. And now this guy has just stolen your spot. What gives? Up to the fourth rung we go. Watch closely as our assumptions take over and our story creates itself. That stupid jerk. Didn't his parents teach him anything? How could he not see my signal light? He must never pay attention. Why does he think he's more important than anyone else? Jumping quickly to the fifth rung, we conclude that this guy is heartless, inconsiderate, he needs to be taught a lesson and put in his place. We feel angry, frustrated, vindictive, justified. On our sixth rung, we adjust our beliefs based on the experience. That's the last time I give in. Next time someone tries to cut me off, tires will be smoking on the pavement as I squeal past them into my spot. And finally, our last rung, we take action. We back up, pull up behind his car, honk our horn, and roll down our window to scream a few choice words his way. Now, imagine, he walks over quickly, apologizing. His wife, who is almost due with their first baby, called him from inside the mall to say she is in labor and needs to get to the hospital immediately. We are momentarily shocked, apologize profusely, and wish him luck as he rushes toward the entrance. What just happened here? What changed? Why is this so significant? In our parking lot example, our beliefs were short-circuited by the ladder of the other individual. My wife is in labor. I need to get there quick. There's a parking spot. Phew! Oh, geez, I cut someone off. I better apologize quickly so they don't think I'm a jerk. But what if we were able to short-circuit our ladders ourselves? Proactively, by choice. Guess what? We can. Let's return to our unique human function of free will. Next time you notice yourself reacting to your experience, pay focused attention to your ladder. Ask yourself what beliefs are at play, where did they come from? What data and observations did you filter in as a result of your beliefs, and why? Are your assumptions valid and supported by facts? Would a different set of assumptions create different feelings and result in new and better conclusions and actions? We all have our own unique ladder. Be mindful of yours and help others to see theirs.
So with that video, what are your thoughts in regards to the ladder of inference?
Could I simply say that the ladder of inferences, I mean, the ladder, not letter, my goodness, the ladder of inferences is really based on your own personal biases, right? Which are pretty much based on what your experiences have been. So if you're not willing enough to step outside of the box of your norms, then you wouldn't have that opportunity to be able to experience life through the lenses of anyone else. And that's where empathy comes in. I know that was a long drawn out response, but.
That is fine. Thank you for sharing. And I see someone put into the chat is that sometimes our perceptions get in the way. So when you're thinking about, in both definitions and explanations and thoughts are great, but when you're thinking about the key mindsets for centering on equity and inclusion, think about how we process things and be willing and kind of like you said, step out of the box of yourself. And be willing to listen to things differently. It's almost with the difference between having a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. So with the growth mindset, we can be looking at raw data and raw numbers. For example, when a guy pulled into the parking space, he went from taking in some raw data all the way up to taking action. He jumped to the 7th rung. And there were a lot of other rungs, 5 other rungs in between there, kind of slow down and process your thoughts and be able to see things from another person's perspective. And some of the things and the questions that it has here is just how you engage with your students. When you're practicing a growth mindset, you might look at the 3rd statement there. It says, my students don't like me, but they get the work done, they're learning, and that's what matters. Or a growth mindset would be, I love that my students are learning. I want them to get a deeper understanding of how students are feeling as they learn in order to strengthen the learning that is happening. Or you might have a student say, or someone say, these questions don't make sense. Students didn't understand what they were being asked. I've heard that with the Panorama survey. Or you could say, I'm still growing with my familiarity and comfort with the Panorama survey. And these are still our students' voices represented in here. What can I learn? And that's kind of the hope, just kind of putting yourself out there and being able to say, what are my students trying to say to me that would be beneficial with how I can respond to them, or how I can be intentional about engaging with them differently versus having a fixed mindset. Okay. Just some thoughts. So as you explore Panorama, the thought is to really think about how you might go through the phases of the ladder of inference. And when you're looking at this, again, typically we look at the data and we go straight to the top. We're ready to take action. But sometimes we might need to sit with it and pause and filter through the data. So when you're filtering through the data, like I see these numbers, I see percentages. So you may see something on Panorama that says % favorable. You might see red, you might see green, you might see yellow. Those colors are tied to something. And typically with our own background, red means what? That there's some type of issue. Green means good, we're ready to go. So those things you bring into when you look at data. But this one is just saying, just stop and pause before we make some assumptions and jump and just filter it. What is the meaning? What's underneath the data? What's not being said? Or what other factors could actually play into this? So you're adding meaning to it. You can make assumptions, but don't make your assumptions be your conclusions. You want to draw conclusions off of everything that you pull into it. And then you can adjust whatever your thoughts are to take intentional actions. And it's a process. And one of the things that it gives to us, and it tells you here, you're basically going from inquiry to advocacy in your actions, but it gives us some questions to kind of process for. So when you're engaging with data, one of the things just to say is, I notice. So you might take a look at the data, you just want to stay there. I notice what? I noticed that our numbers increased. I noticed that 5 students responded. Or I wonder what students were thinking at the time when they filled out the survey. I wonder if COVID had anything to do with the impact of how they're responding. And then here are 3 possible reasons why possible. Notice it's not here are 3 reasons why. It says here are 3 possible reasons. And then it gives you some things to be mindful of, as in to blink always, be careful of the nevers, and be careful of this must be false because. So those are some things that we just want to caution and be mindful of removing when we take a look at the panorama data and any data from that standpoint. So question, I'm going to pause. Do y'all want to practice peeking at the panorama data for a second? I'm taking silence as yes. So let's take a look at it. And I gotta get a couple people access here. So if you haven't tried this, try logging into here. If y'all notice on the screen, it's my CCS email and then my password. And you might have to cut and paste that URL into the address bar here. So when you log into Panorama, what you'll see is a screen similar to mine. You may just see Columbus City Schools, and then if you are linked to a specific school, you have your schools listed. And then one thing that everyone should have access to at the top is definitely the playbook. So again, you might have a blank screen, that's fine, but you should definitely have the playbook in the upper right-hand corner. And I'm not going to look at the playbook yet. I'm going to take you to some data so that we can practice with the ladder of inference. So when you take a look at the winter survey that just occurred, one of the things that it has here is it has the competencies or the topics. So the topics that we surveyed for social emotional learning for students, we looked at supportive relationships, social awareness, efficacy, and emotional regulation. So we looked at those 3 things. And if you click on, see the little blue button, how something comes up? If you click on that piece right there, it gives you a short definition for which each of those areas actually are and what it's referring to. So one of the areas that we're looking at as a district is self-efficacy. And for self-efficacy, it's saying how much students believe they can succeed in achieving academic outcomes. Just do they have the belief that they can do it and that they can accomplish something? I know my son was struggling. He's a senior at a CCS high school, and he was struggling with his science class. And he just didn't have the belief that he could muster up the strength to get through it. But with some work and with lots of help from the teacher, from us as parents, advocating for him, pushing for him, making sure that he had the resources that he needed to feel successful, he's starting to see some change there. And one of the things that he came and said to me earlier this week, or I would say earlier this week, he was like, I feel good about science, Mom. So he has that self-efficacy. He has that belief that he can actually do this. And then the other priority that we have for the district was emotional regulation. It's, can you regulate your emotions? Can you, if a situation happens that triggers you, brings some emotions, do you go from 0 to 10? Or do you go from 0 to -10? So 0 to 10 would mean like, I'm going from here to I'm having an outburst. And then to the negative, I'm just having a straight meltdown. So 2 extremes. Or can I balance and manage it? So how well you manage emotions. So this is just some thoughts here. So when you're looking at the data here and you peek at it, when you're thinking about the ladder of inference, let me take you back to the ladder of inference. And here's what we're looking for: that I notice, I wonder, and here are 3 possible reasons why. Okay, so those are our stems. So when you're looking at the district data, what are you noticing? What are you wondering? And do you have any possible reasons for why? And y'all can type in the chat or y'all can share it. Any thoughts? I notice, I wonder, any of the above? Okay, I had to stop my screen share just to see if y'all are there. Okay, I see some people in the room. So I know y'all are out there. So when I'm looking at, okay, Holly is saying, why has the emotional regulation went down? That's a wonder. Thank you, Holly. Any other thoughts? I'm going to share my screen. I just had to make sure y'all were still there. Okay, that was for grades 3 through 5. And then I want to give you a peek at grades 6 through 12, just so you can see what theirs are. Same topics were covered. And there may be some similarities there. But the priority again could be the same. I wonder why was there no change in emotional regulation? I noticed there's no change. And no change meaning from, see up here where it says the fall survey. So from fall to winter, so fall would have been given in October and a winter survey was in January. And then the same thing with self-efficacy. For self-efficacy, there was a drop where just students weren't too sure about what was happening there. So I wonder what caused the drop. Could it have been the season? Because in December, we get that long haul, and you can be impacted by a seasonal affective disorder where the weather and the long gray days impact your emotions. So that could it be that? Possibly. So just something to think about. So versus, excuse me, jumping to conclusions and saying that this data is rubbish. There's nothing that we can do for it with it. It's just a different way to look at it. Just like, what are you noticing and what are you wondering? And what could be those possibilities? So the encouragement here is just to stay low on the ladder of inference. Don't go all the way to that 7th rung where you're starting to jump in with some action. So just take it slow and digest it. Because as you see, I mean, go back to the data, it's a lot of data. And you can even look at the student supports and environments and thinking about what that is. So it does it for the students in elementary grades 3 through 5. And then, excuse me, then it does the same thing for grades 6 through 12. Okay. So you'll have an opportunity to play with that. So again, what we actually measured, that'd just be here for your reference, just so that you have it and can focus in on that. And then it gives a brief definition for which each of those areas are. Again, the 2 district priorities were definitely self-efficacy and emotional regulation, with making sure that all of our students from K-12 have that support with understanding what their emotions are, being able to identify them and name it. Because sometimes they say when you can name it, you can tame it, and get expanding their vocabulary around their emotional feelings can actually help strengthen their self-efficacy. Because if they can manage their emotions, if they can manage those tough droughts and celebrate whatever excitements they may have in a healthy way, and that benefits them in the long haul. I want to make sure I'm not missing anything in the chat. And thank you, Holly, for noticing that. Holly put some other things in there about what she noticed with the data too. So thank you. So here's the next thing. So what can you do with the data? And I want to give you some time to explore too. One of the things that you can do with the data is just explore. We're staying low on that ladder of inference again. You can zoom into questions, and I want to show you what this actually looks like. So if you're taking, I went back to the Panorama deck, and say I wanted to look at self-efficacy. If you click on where it says explore, it'll break down just that particular topic within Panorama. And it'll show you how the student's trajectory was across that grades 3 through 5. So you notice from winter 2021 all the way up to winter 2022, there was some small growth. I noticed small growth. I wonder why, what's happening there. You can also see a comparison between the district and national norm reference data. And then you can also see the different types of groups by demographics. But the neat thing is that you can actually drill down into the questions. So you will not be able to see what students said what, but you'll kind of give a composite average of what they actually said. But you can see the responses to the questions. So you see the actual question that was on the survey, and then you can see how the students actually responded. If there was a question where you felt like, oh, I want to dig more into this question, you can actually bookmark it and save it. And then you can add it to your bookmark. You can say whatever it was. You can type whatever notes you need. And then when you're looking for it again, I'm going to show you where the bookmark is. The bookmark is right here. So anything that's highlighted in your bookmark, you can just click on it and you can view it and see it. So again, you can always do that deeper dive where you just want to go up that ladder of inference slowly. So you go past your I wonders, and then you do a deeper dive to say, well, what questions were they asked? Oh, well, this is why they may have responded this way. I wonder. Here's some possible reasons. And then at the end down here, it gives you some playbook moves. And we'll explore the Panorama Playbook. So it gives you some suggested moves that you can actually dig into and learn a bit more about. Okay. I want to make sure I have time to explore. So let me jump back to the presentation. Any questions before I get off of this particular page? If you have a question, feel free to stop me. So other things that you can do is to save to the playbook, and I'll show you how to actually save things to your playbook. And some of you may already know because you're probably already doing some of these things. So one, again, just practice staying low on the data and that rung. And I want to take you just to show you this part. If you're working with a classroom teacher, who has access to what? So I'll clarify that for you. If it's a classroom teacher that has a cohort of students assigned to them, they will have access to student data. If it is someone like an administrator, a social worker, a school counselor, school psychologist, possibly school nurses, they may have access to school-wide data, depending on their engagement with the school and what they're requesting their access to be. So they have the ability to actually create groups. So during your planning times, if you attend TBT meetings or if you do planning with teachers, I would actually sit down and say, hey, I've noticed these behaviors, just to notice. Let's check out our Panorama data and see what's happening. And you can actually create two types of group. A SMART group, just to kind of give you some context with the SMART group for how they're defining it here. A SMART group would be you're selecting students and putting them into targeted groups, which is on that PBIS tier 2, small targeted groups, but they are working on a similar skill. So that would be a topic like emotional regulation. Stagnant groups would be like, okay, I have a lunch bunch. I can record my lunch bunch here. I can record any supports or data that I have to support along with that. Or it could be a walking club. That would kind of be your stagnant group. But again, the SMART group, those groups are driven by the data that you have. Is there a question? Not sure. So here, I'm going to give you some time to explore. So I am going to ask you to kind of do a little exploring in the Panorama Playbook. But before I ask you to explore, I just want to take you through it just a little bit. So when you're looking at the Panorama Playbook, Panorama Playbook, one of the things that you can do is you can actually click where it says Playbook at the top of your screen. And then on the playbook, it has a wealth of information, y'all, like a wealth of information that you can use. And it can be a little overwhelming. So one of the things that I would highly recommend that we do for this particular thing is dig into one of the things that's kind of a district perspective. And we're looking at it holistically. So emotional regulation. I just want to just scroll down just so that you can see everything that's there. So it has all the different topics that are there that you can kind of click into. But emotional regulation, I want to show you this one because it expands. So it gives you a definition for what emotional regulation is. It gives you some questions to kind of think about when you're trying to learn about it from a student's perspective. And then it gives you some moves, like it gives you some strategies that you can actually apply and use. If y'all notice on my screen, I have some that, see this star right here is not lit up. But see this star over here is lit up. And notice it says remove from playbook. Over here where it's white, it says add to my playbook. You can do that, and that way you don't have to go back through the hundreds of resources that they have. You can automatically you can customize your playbook and go to it specifically to kind of, this is what I want to focus in on, and this is what I want to look at. So when you're looking at this, I want to take you into one that's kind of lit up, and then let me show you my playbook. Staying calm when I'm angry. So I'm going to click on that one. You can read about it. So it kind of gives you a goal for what this activity is, an overview of what it's meaning. And then it also gives you the resource for where it came from. So this is from Everyday Speech. So Panorama has partnered with other SEL companies, and they've actually lended some of their activities to their playbook moves. So it takes you through everything that you need to know. So it gives you an introduction. It gives you a script. Not all of them do, but most do. This one, it has a video. So that video might be pretty interesting to watch. And then it tells you it says using video modeling to demonstrate how calming strategies can be used to manage feelings of anger and equip students with skills. So you're building their toolkit. You're building their toolkit and their ability to manage their emotion, increasing their self-efficacy. And then it gives you just a little bit of information about everyday speech. But one of the things here, if you look on the side, see down here at the bottom where it says details, effort level. The effort level is low, meaning that it's not a lot of vested time and it's not a heavy lift in order to do this activity with students. So key things that you can do, you can print it off and save it as a PDF. So if I click save as right here, I can actually save it. You can save it as a PDF and I can print it. Or I can just print it as is. PDFs are a little prettier. But if I want to save it to my playbook, it's saved. So this one is saved. And let me show you my playbook at the top. So I don't have to go back searching through everything. See where it says my playbook? You should have the same thing on your side too. So if I click on my playbook, I can see all the different things that I've actually saved. And do I want to keep them all there? I can take things in, I can take things out. Okay. So these are the things that I saved to my playbook. So again, if you like something, I would say click it and save it. Okay, so I'm gonna give you about 7 minutes to explore their Panorama Playbook. And I want to make sure that everyone has access to actually logging in. So is there anyone who needs access to Panorama to make sure you can log into the playbook?
Tyree, I put in the chat that Deanna and Ms. Holly need access.
Okay, I will get you access. Let me grab that from the chat. Thank you, Lydia. In the slide deck that I want to make sure that you have access to. So one thing that you have is you will be able to see some things that are already linked to the Panorama Playbook. So these are all things that deal with emotional regulation. So you can click on those and you'll have access to those pieces there. I'm just checking the chat. Making sure I didn't miss nothing. Then at the end, this is a plethora of resources. So if you need reflection sheets, if you want to know how to break down reports, if you want to do check-ins with your students, it has all of those things there, and some other good things that it has. Let me get out of presentation mode. Is a whole appendix. And in your appendix, you're going to have access to a wealth of information that you can choose to use with your students, with the teachers you support in regards to academics, making it inclusive, more equity-centered pieces. And then all of the pieces and companies that you see here, they're all part of the Panorama Playbook. So even it says equity course for educators with the 7 mindsets, responding to hate or biases at school. And then what's we are the same and different, and count me down. So all of those things, and Move This World. If you like videos, they include a lot of videos with their work. So all of these are linked back to the playbook, but you have access to them. And then just one little piece more. Love Brene Brown. She's a researcher with, I would say, with social sciences, but it's probably a little bit more than that. But she's done some things with exploring leadership, but daring to be brave, and the power of empathy and what that looks like. So if you want to do some deep dive there, these are actually video links. So you can click on the videos and read those too. And then words kids love to hear. So almost those positive affirmations. How can we fill their buckets by calling out what's good about them, what's smart about them, naming, like again, you're naming it and saying it to make them a believer that they can actually do it and see themselves differently. So thank you all for joining me. Hopefully everyone has access to Panorama. If you don't, trivers3482, just email me so that I can make sure you have access. And if you need more information, I'm just a phone call or email away.